Right. And of course, AI being mainstream, it is hard to avoid just how mainstream it is. It is absolutely at the top of that hype cycle, and nothing could say that more than last week's special that Oprah, of all people, did on AI. When Oprah covers your space, you know that you are top of mind for the mainstream. And she brought in some of the biggest names in AI, Sam Altman, Bill Gates, tech influencer Marquise Brownlee, who does all these fantastic device and consumer tech breakdowns. And it was interesting to see that we have gotten to the point where everybody can be an expert in AI now. Everybody can talk about how important this stuff is and how it affects the mainstream.
Yeah, I think the only way AI could have gotten more mainstream is if Taylor Swift incorporated into her Eras tour in some way. Which
Right?
actually, I'm sure if we dug deep enough, we would find an AI story that's powering the Eras tour. But yeah, like as you said, when Oprah covers your space, you know you've made it on the front page, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's a very interesting topical discussion. Obviously, we in tech have been talking about AI for a lot longer than the last year plus since ChatGPT hit the scene. But I think, the Chat GPT becoming publicly available was the thing that got the general public starting to talk about these types of conversations and the implication it has on everyone's day-to-day life. And seeing Oprah have Sam Altman, in the interview chair, and Bill Gates and Marquise as well, who I absolutely have loved his YouTube channel forever. To kind of see all of these topics get woven into a very non-technical conversation uh,
Mhm.
on everybody's television or computer screen is very, very interesting to see. I mean, I think many of us in tech feel like we're behind the scenes. Especially those of us who work for companies that are helping everyday companies deliver their services and products to their customers. You don't actually see technology in the spotlight unless it's a consumer oriented technology or something along those lines. So to see AI, and specifically Gen AI, become a massive topic of conversation in the general public is very interesting to see. And I would say lots of positives for that, but there could be some downside and some backlash to bringing that conversation into the mainstream.
Yes, as we were prepping for this call, one of the interesting points I think you brought up was how Sam Altman is starting to look like the villain. If you live long enough in tech, you will become the villain at some
Look,
point in your lifetime. We've seen
I
it
mean, we
with
can go
everyone
back to
from
Larry,
yeah,
taking it back to Oracle. Larry was the original, billionaire to be villainized at some point or
mhm,
see his perceived as a villain. Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, I think they've all had their turn at being
sure.
the bad guy, the harbinger of technical transformation that impacts everyday life. And now it's Sam's turn. It's very interesting. I think there's some industry chatter about what does it mean when Sam pulls himself out of the security committee for AI
Mhm.
oversight. What does it mean that as an industry we have yet to adopt uh, standards around AI safety and governance? Again, we're early days in this, and I think there's an expectation that we're being very thoughtful from a technology point of view about how we use AI and how we use AI specifically to enhance human output rather than replace humans in the process. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how companies like OpenAI and others approach this.
Yes, and of course, AI companies want it both ways. They don't want any governance coming from federal or state governments, but they also want to be able to basically break copyright laws left and right and don't want to be held accountable for anything that they've done. And those two sides are not going to work.
Yeah,
You're going to have to pick
you can't have
something
it
at the
both
end.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, and,
Hmm.
and I think, I mean, it's driving an interesting conversation, especially around copyright. Most of our copyright laws around the world are 100 years old or more, right? You've got some of the copyright acts were updated, in the 2000s, when we had the music sharing and the file sharing. It's become mainstream. Every technical evolution drives a new level of conversation about how we need to revisit legacy thoughts and legacy regulations around how we manage things like intellectual property, people's personal data, all of these things. And I think having the conversation is great, but I also think that the leaders of these companies need to be out front, being a champion for just having the conversation so we get to the best outcome. Of course, nobody wants restrictions being put on their business, especially we're in the early stages of hyper growth. But the
Mhm.
reality is if we in technology aren't willing to lead the conversation, we're going to have those restrictions put upon us.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's better to be able to figure out some way to cooperatively figure all this out. But it's going to be a mess between the data, the models, the logic, the training, the
Yeah,
augmentation, the ongoing support, the changes that are happening in these models on a weekly basis.
yeah.
There's a whole lot to juggle here. And I think we're a couple years away from even figuring out what a stable ecosystem looks like for enterprise AI.
Yeah, and as we know, regulators in most countries are not the most technology savvy, and
Yes,
they're all subject to the influence of the uh, the folks who are piling money into their campaigns and giving them opinions on how they should feel about these sorts of things. So it'll be very interesting to see how we make it through this concept of regulation. Lobbyists on
eh,
all sides are going to be throwing large amounts of money into these influence campaigns to help people who are legislators decide how they feel about legislation affecting something that is going to be and already is truly transformative to the world we live in. So,
yes. So we've got Oprah and the politicians all giving their 2 cents. It's
yeah.
it's a wild time to be in tech right now.